family, friends, all of my qualifiers. Dr. G here. It's a pleasure to be with you all. As promised, we're going to continue to have very good content. We're going to have very good guests. We're going to have pertinent discussions that is relevant to our time. I have with us today none other than Miss Lori Morton.
Miss Lori Morton is a minister, relational analyst, and career transformational coach. She is also the founder of Silver Lining Enterprise, a coaching and consulting firm that directs professionals on how to cultivate their strongest areas of expertise in order to accelerate their professional careers, transform their personal lives, and expand their impact and influence. She's a native of South Florida and holds a bachelor's degree from Wesleyan College, where she majored in psychology. Following her graduation and discerning a call into ministry, she enrolled at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary and graduated with a master's in marriage and family therapy. Miss Lori also holds a second master's degree from Albizu University in industrial and organizational psychology with an emphasis on executive coaching and training development.
We also have with us Dr. Richard Lewis.
Dr. Richard Lewis is the manager of the Bachelor's of Applied Science Student Support Services for the Supervision and Management Program at Broward College. Dr. Lewis received his bachelor's degree of Science in Athletic Administration from St. John's University, Master's of Arts in Sports Administration from Wayne State University, Master of Business Administration in Human Resources, and Doctorate of Education in Organizational Leadership from Nova Southeastern University. His dissertation was titled "The Relationship Between Recidivism Rates and Post-Release Rates." In his prior professional experience, Dr. Lewis also worked for a Fortune Society in New York as a family services specialist, in which his job was to assist single fathers who were formerly incarcerated, successfully integrated into mainstream society, which included being reunited with their children and building new and fulfilling post-incarceration lives. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we would love to welcome you now, Miss Lori Morton and Dr. Richard Lewis.
Fasten your seatbelts, enjoy the ride, because we're going to discuss what's going on this week. A lot of us are real nervous about the verdict of the Derek Chauvin case, amongst other things. We just hope that this episode, this show, is able to provide you some insight, some truth, and some alternatives and ways that we can react without being physically reactive, but using our minds, our intelligence, and what God has given us, because we are still qualified to win no matter what happens. Good day, family. As mentioned earlier, I am elated and honored to have with us Miss Lori Morton and Dr. Richard Lewis. These are two esteemed, educated, and scholastic individuals. I couldn't have anybody else more fit for this topic of conversation. I remember having this conversation with Dr. Lewis some time ago, because we both did our doctorate together. We practically started at the institution we work at together. And Miss Morton and I have had many rhetorics due to experiences and different things that has occurred in our face with what we do. But I remember when I used to work for BSO, and many people don't know that, but I did my little time at BSO, and I'm really glad it didn't work out. I have to be honest, because being a police officer has great responsibility, and it warrants a lot of patience. It warrants a lot of passion, but more important, you have to be an individual who loves everybody, no matter who or what they are, as far as their orientation, their color, creed, wherever they come from. And I remember one important thing that occurred while getting trained at BSO is they always informed us that, hey, if somebody is aggressive, you as an officer are an example. You are a servant of a civil servant. More importantly, you're an individual who has to be I would to say for lack of better words, you have to be an individual who has more character than the average. If an individual overreacts, if an individual you pull over, or if there's a case where you're in the jail, if you're a corrections officer, whatever have you, if an individual surrenders, you as a police officer, even if they attacked you, you have to have the ability, the patience, the integrity, and you have to have the moral character to subside any reservations or anything that you would do typically on the streets. So in other words, you can't bring that street mentality to the workforce. You can't bring that street mentality to the job force. If somebody attacks you and then they surrender and they get in the position of surrender where they put their hands behind their backs and they want to be arrested at that moment in time, even if they hit you, you cannot respond. And this was the training we had at the academy when I worked for the police force that I was working for. And I'm just so amazed to see what has been going on the past few years. Well, I need to rephrase that. Not really what's going on, what has been televised, because this is nothing new. For the past several years, the past few years, what has been televised on television, social media, and we have to thank God for social media, because that platform is allowing everybody to see, hey, listen, this is the reality in Black America. This is the reality. And I even I was watching CNN the other day, and I'll quote what Kumo said. He basically stated that police reform won't happen until white kids start getting killed. And it was pretty much one of those things where it's unfortunate, but that's the sad reality. And I want to hear from Miss Morton. We're gonna say ladies first. I know Dr. Lewis agrees with me, the boss first. From a psychological standpoint, and I know you can elaborate and elucidate more on this, because not only do you come from a psychological background, not only do you come from a background, if you don't mind me saying it, the police force at your capacity, you're also a minister. And as a minister, you deal with all sorts of people from all walks of life. And I would love to hear from you, because the first thing we want to capitalize is that even the Derek Chauvin case that's going on, the killing of Dante, what's been going on in our society, what's going on in Black America, previous and current, these issues. I would love to hear from you, Ms. Morton, and then right after Dr. Lewis, please jump in, and I would like for us to have this open conversation without reservation. Can you please provide your insight, your observation, and what it is that you feel is going on as far as the police force in regards to racism, harassment, and police brutality in Black America?
Well, thank you, Dr. Fabre, for having me, first of all. I'm excited to be here and to talk about this topic. This topic I know hits home for all three of us in very personal ways and in professional ways. But, just to get right to the point, I think the police system, the structure of policing in this country is working very well, because it's doing what it was designed to do, which is keeping Black people and people of color in their place.
Wow.
So when you understand the structure of policing and police departments, then you understand it's working quite well. It's doing the very thing it was structured and created to do, which was to keep us in our place. So when we start talking about, what's wrong with the system and the system is broken and we need reform, no, actually we have to toss this whole thing out. We've got to throw the whole thing away, because you cannot reform something that at its core is designed against you.
Wow.
This whole structure wasn't designed to keep us protected. This whole structure wasn't designed to value our lives. This structure wasn't designed to see us as humans and see us as equals to those in positions of authority in the police department. So it's working well. Wow. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is keep us in our place. And if we fall out of place, if we forget our place, then our lives are in jeopardy. It costs us our lives, but it's doing the very thing it was designed to do.
Wow. And it's crazy you say that. It's a sad truth, because leaving my home, my family's always constantly afraid that I may not make it back home, because a simple traffic stop, because of how it was designated, how it was created, and as you mentioned, the infrastructure, it has been designed, to put us in a place where if we don't align to their infrastructure or how it was created, there's a possibility we either will be in prison or killed. Wow. Dr. Lewis, can you please provide your insight as well on this topic matter? Same question, please provide your insight. We would love to hear what your take is as far as that's concerned as well.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Fabre. And Ms. Morton, she's a tough act to follow, but I'll try my best to follow up on that. I love the answer that Ms. Morton gave, because it's an answer in which I feel very similarly to, as far as that's concerned. Mm-hmm. When I started doing my studies, well, let me first say that when I criticize the system, I'm criticizing the system and not necessarily the people in it. There are people that I've grown up with that are police officers or correction officers or probation officers, or lawyers or district attorneys, that they work in the system. So this is not, my feelings are not an indictment of them as people, but really it's an indictment of the system as I look at it. And when Ms. Morton talked about the system is working exactly as it should, historically, we go back all the way to the 13th Amendment, when we went to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and we were abolishing slavery as a country, or at least supposedly abolishing slavery as a country. We have now gotten to the point where we put things in place where there was a lot of foundations set for Jim Crow, convict leasing, and just really, and vagrancy laws that was really designed to say, no, we need to capture the people that we want to put in the place we feel that they should be in. And from my standpoint, when I started doing studies on criminal justice reform as part of our doctoral program, when I was doing my dissertation, it was really thinking about reform and reentry. And I think as I continue to go towards that place, as far as continuing to study and go into this field, or the research in this field, I'm more so become more of an abolitionist. Not so much we abolish slavery, but now I'm talking about an abolitionist as far as the criminal justice system. We have a system that, yes, it is working exactly as it's supposed to, because at the end of the day, it's not valuing the lives of the people it says it's designed to protect. It's not valuing the lives of people of color. And I include that us as African Americans, I include that our Hispanic brothers and sisters, I include our Asian brothers and sisters, anyone of color, it's just not valuing their lives. So of course, a system that manifests brutality and harassment towards us is working the way it's supposed to work, because at its foundation, there's no value for the sanctity of the lives of the people that they claim that they are trying to protect.
And it's unfortunate that you state that, because you said slavery was supposed to be abolished, but I believe this is the current facet of slavery. This is the current system that has been implemented to allow slavery, or to continue the slavery movement. Because slavery, and if we want to be honest, slavery actually is still here. You know, we have had over 500 years of slavery, and so many lives have been lost. And it seems like the lives are continuing to get lost, but in our very eyes, in this country. And while we're at it, Dr. Lewis, what steps do you think that needs to be taken, especially when you consider the police force? Because you mentioned that you have friends, colleagues who are in the police force, that would root out systematic racism from our local police forces, promote zero tolerance as far as racism from our police forces, and basically express the act of racist sentiments. Because I see a lot of times when you see somebody get pulled over, that officer, from time to time, you hear officers have the proclivities to use these certain subliminal messages to act as though they could relate to Black culture when they pull us over. Their accents change, or they start to use colloquials that we use typically, or they try to act like they could relate. But in all reality, it's really not to put us at ease. It's more like a way of insulting us.
what do you say needs to take place? Because we want to attack today I would like for us to attack the root of the problem before we discuss a couple of these situations. But what do you think needs to take place, and what's the actual root of the problem that needs to take place or that needs to be exposed?
Well, one of our brothers, Gil Scott Heron, always said the revolution will not be televised.
Right.
But certainly the revolution with our smartphones is being documented. Absolutely. And I think that when you're looking at to root out systemic racism in the police force, I think the police force is a microcosm or a mirror image of where we are as a society. We're a systemically racist society, and I think we have not had the courage to really address that and really face that. And I think that when you're looking at that systemic racism is there, you have to look at how do you sit there and really re-engineer or reform or change the system. And I don't know if the system in its root could be changed. You have to say, okay, you know what? We have to take this completely out and completely re-engineer it. That's where a lot of these things, these slogans of defund the police comes from. Now, and what I like to say is that we as people of color, when people say, okay, defund the police, we're not literally saying defund the police. We're not defunding or want to eliminate a system of law enforcement and rules and procedures, because surprisingly, we as people of color, we want rules and procedures. I don't want someone to come into my house and to sit there and take what they want.
Right.
I don't, as you know, the experience that I went through losing my son, I don't want someone saying that it's okay to just murder someone. I don't want to live in a world like that. But I also know that I don't want to live in a world where you, myself, or Ms. Morton, or any of us are going to sit there and say, you know what? I don't want to go outside at a certain time of day or night because I may get pulled over.
Wow.
I have to worry about when I'm going to come home very quickly, or stay on the phone when I'm out to make sure somebody can hear me that I'm out and about, or whatever the case may be, or make sure that I'm getting home okay, so to speak. So I think that to your question about how do you root out systemic racism, I think we have to just re-engineer the entire system. I think that when we look at a law enforcement or public safety presence, we have to have a system that really talks about putting the foundation of valuing life, which means that we should have therapists, we should have social workers, we should have public safety also involved in it. We should also have dynamics of economic development and all these type of things that come into play to really say, what does public safety mean? Because someone's not robbing anyone if you have the ability to support yourself. Absolutely. No one's not worried about, okay, am I going to get pulled over if I know that public safety has a value of life? No one will say, okay, I'm going to hesitate to call 911 if there's an episode going on in my house that could be a mental health episode with a family member or a loved one, but I'm not going to call the police because I'm afraid that the police will come and murder or kill the person that's having that episode. So I think that when we look at the entire system as far as a restorative and transformative justice model, we start with the foundation of the value of life and really look and say, what does that mean from a public safety standpoint? And I think that we have to use words that really don't, when we talk about law enforcement, it's almost like we're enforcing or imposing our wills. Do we say things like public safety? Mm-hmm. Do we say things like, public health, mental health, all those things that come into play to really make it a safe environment? Because we have to think about what makes us safe. And to me, when people run around saying, well, they want to protect the right to own a gun more so than protecting our right to vote, that doesn't make me feel more safe.
Mercy.
I think that we have to really talk into terms of designing a system that really talks about safety, the welfare and the well-being of us with the foundation of the value of life.
Awesome. Before you even move further, you mentioned so many points, and Dr. Lewis, I am just amazed at your perspective, because your perspective brought forth more insight where we can shift to another direction with the same question and tackle another issue. And I would love to hear from Ms. Morton, especially with her background as a psychologist, counselor, and therapist. I would love for her to elaborate more on that, because what I do understand, I don't know if any of you, whether watching us or any of you here, have seen this sitcom called Them.
and how there are Black neighbors or Black residents who moved into a fully white neighborhood. They moved into the suburban white neighborhood, and they were, unfortunately, they were unwelcomed. They were treated as estranged individuals. They were not basically allowed to live at the same capacity level or breathe the same air the same way all the other Caucasians did. Ms. Morton, provide some more insight from the mindset of a therapist that you are. What do you think, as far as the same question, as far as it being rooted, but what counseling methods would you say is needed in our communities? What counseling methods are needed in our communities because of the years of brutality that we've received? And if we may add, what type of counseling do police officers also need?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a lot. I think it's important for us as Black people to understand the level of trauma we carry in us.
Right.
Okay? The level of generational trauma. So there are experiences that we all have, but then there are experiences that we live through our parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, our village, our friends. And so it's not just our direct experiences that have traumatized us, but it's a collective, it's the collective experiences that have traumatized us. It is the news, and seeing another story, on the news, seeing another video on IG, seeing another video on Twitter. And so it is trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. And I don't know if people in other groups understand how compounded our trauma is.
Right.
And so we come to the table already hurting generationally, right? We come to the table already wounded and hurting generationally. And so to have a structure in place that continues to dehumanize us and continues to discount and ignore the generations of trauma, the hundreds of years of trauma, and then your own lived trauma, your own experienced trauma, is even more traumatic, right? Like, so there's no escaping it. We just come to the table wounded. So one of the things that we need is, again, just kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, but that's not reality. As Dr. Lewis, shared with us, that's probably not possible in this country. We're not gonna be able to dismantle all of this. Right. So we have to find a way to find places not only of comfort, but places of health and function within a dysfunctional and unhealthy system. So one of the ways that we do that, right, is retraining police officers, right? So let me just say this. I echo what Dr. Lewis said. The structure, the system is dysfunctional. The system is damaged. But there are incredible men and women in our police departments that are doing the work, that are kind, that are compassionate, that are caring, that are sensitive, that see everyone as humans.
Absolutely.
Value human life. And so I think it's important to reiterate that there are really great officers.
Right.
So how do we create more great officers? Like, how do we hire great officers? So just kind of looking at that from a hiring and recruiting perspective, how do we, what kind of tests do we need to have in place? What kind of psychological tests do we have in place to root out unconscious bias? How do we continue to have that kind of training that's continual in the force, in the department, so that you catch things? Because if I have some bias at work, people's lives aren't at stake, right? So the level, the level of responsibility is different. Absolutely. In certain industries, right? There's certain industries you just can't have a bad day because somebody could be dead. Right. And so when you come to that industry, when you enter that, you have to understand that you can't just have a bad day, right? Because people end up dead. And so how do we put things in place in a system where we're we're checking on our officers. We're making sure that they're healthy. That of course, I'm not in law enforcement. I don't know it from the inside out. So that this may be happening, but if it's happening, it's not happening often enough. Right. We have to check on our officers. We've got to make sure that their mental health is on point. We've got to make sure that they're healthy, that they're taking advantage of the resources. Sometimes you have to tell people, listen, you've got to have an administrative leave. You've got to take some time to work through some things. Because again, when you have a bad day, someone could end up dead. Just kind of putting some things in place where there's some self-care for our officers, and there's retraining, and there's continual evaluation. But the other part too, as Dr. Lewis said, is approaching things from a public safety perspective. So how do we keep people safe physically? How do we keep people safe emotionally? How do we keep people safe mentally? And so it has to be a village approach. It has to be a comprehensive approach. There has to be law enforcement, but there has to be mental health, care. There has to be social services care, so that when someone arrives on the scene, it's not just an officer, but it's a team of people. It's triage. It's a team of people coming to answer the call to make sure that the public is safety.
Absolutely. And that's phenomenal that you say that. Very well said, Ms. Morton, because one thing you said prompts me to ask you this. Do you think having officers who actually live in the community they actually service would have a better impact on how they deal with civilians who need help, who needs actual policing? Do you think that if I lived, for example, if I lived in Inverary and I go and I police Parkland, I may not understand that demographic well enough. And when I pull someone over from Parkland, I may operate off of the mindset or the aptitude of Inverary. But do you think that if I were to police in the area or the vicinity that I live in, that I would have a better result, or police officers would have a better result of how they treat civilians? What's your take on that, especially speaking from a psychological standpoint?
Family and friends, this topic of conversation is heating up. Listen, we're going to continue next week. We're just getting started. Tune in next Thursday at 6 p.m. as we continue this topic of conversation concerning police brutality, what's going on, the verdict. Tune in next week, 6 p.m. Dr. George Fabre. Good day to all of my qualifiers, my family, my friends. I want to take this moment to thank you all for watching this podcast. We have more to come. Every Thursday at 6 p.m. Expect to get some new material, new content that we will be sharing. We'll be covering all types, all sorts of topics. Don't miss out. Listen, follow us, subscribe, do all that you got to do. Subscribe to our YouTube page. What are you waiting for? Let's get it done. Let's do this together. Share, comment, provide all the insight that you have. Let us share and learn from each other respectfully and with love. One more thing, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. I am drg.fab. Also on Facebook, Dr. George Fabre. And don't forget to like our page. And also, if you want this merchandise, you want all these apparel merchandise and all of the things that we have to offer, our book, The Controversy of Divorce and Remarriage, don't forget to go to drgeorgefabre.com. Again, drgeorgefabre.com. I appreciate and love all of you all. See you next week, 6 p.m.